I'm Prashant Ziskind, and welcome to Nelson Today. This evening we are starting our second interview, part 2, with Christopher Moon. Christopher is going to be doing a workshop in the Nelson area starting May 3rd. It's the evening lecture, and then there's a weekend workshop after that. And we're very happy that he consented to continue our conversation from last week. Welcome this evening, Christopher.
Thank you. It's nice to be here again.
So I was just fascinated by our last conversation, dying to ask you some more questions.
Great.
I think I'd like to get a little bit more of the parameters of what you may be doing in the workshop that's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the first evening talks about stepping into abundance, and then the theme of the workshop itself is the love intention. Are those two related?
Usually. When I write those, the material to be put into the brochure, I don't see the connection at that point, and then I just watch everything fall into place. But it does seem to be that with all the cities I've gone to lately, a lot of the feedback I've gotten just by talking to people is that there is a major concern around money, and it's growing, and there doesn't seem to be an apparent reason for it. As such, there hasn't been a big drop in the stock market, there hasn't been any major physical thing that people can relate it to other than the interest rates went up another % or something. But there has been a concern, and it started sometime in November last year, and it's been going ever since, around money and around having enough. And abundance, what abundance is about is not about being a millionaire necessarily, although that's fine too. What abundance is about feeling like you have enough, feeling content, feeling rich with what you have, and from that attitude inviting wealth into your life, inviting more riches into your life in whatever form they come. Now the love intention is connected because where we started out, the very reason that we do anything on this planet is ultimately we find we need love. We want love. Everything we go after, when we go after money, it's because we think we'll feel more love when we have it. We go after a relationship, same thing. And what I found is that the more you feel love, the more abundant you feel. And they're totally connected in that way. Because if you love yourself, you feel more worthy. And if you feel more worthy, you're more attractive. And if you're more attractive, you're going to attract more good things into your life.
So this isn't one of the workshops to teach you how to manifest or wish that Mercedes-Benz into your garage, or...
For some people it might be. For some people it may be that they want to learn how to manifest more material security into their lives. And there are basic principles around manifesting that I've discovered that are fine, if that's what you're interested in. The focus is on more finding the wealth inside you, finding the reason why we do what we do. Everything that we do is all motivated from that same one place, and that's the need for happiness.
Right. That money is such a complex issue for people. It means so many different things to people. I have to hand it to you. I think it takes some courage to even embark in that realm because it's so complex.
It is, and yet all the really the self-made millionaires, all the people that made money and lost it and then were able to make it again, because some people made money and then lost it and weren't able to make it again, but the people that have the real feel for money, they have a completely different attitude about money than people who are scrounging around for it and having a lot of anxiety around it.
What is that attitude? How would you encapsulate that?
Almost as though it's not the money itself. It's some kind of experience that they get by playing the game, by playing the money game. There are a sect in the Jewish religion and one in the Chinese, one of the Chinese religions, that use making money as a spiritual path. And they take it right out of the importance of the actual dollar bill or whatever they whatever you call it, they put it into personal development or transpersonal growth. That the actual making of the money is just a reflection to show you where you're at in your life. Just as relationships are for most of us. Relationships are the mirror to show us where we are in our lives, to have us confront ourselves. These people, for them, making money is just, it's a path for them.
So it's the process.
It's the process, right.
That's focused on, and not what they can buy with it or the end product.
Exactly.
That comes with it.
Exactly. Everything, what it comes down to is what we enjoy most in life is process, not the end result.
It's an interesting approach. I think it could greatly influence our culture for the better if we started to look at it in a broader sense.
I hope so, because the way we're looking at it now is not healthy. We really are looking at it as though it's every man for himself or every woman for herself. And it's just not healthy for us at all.
I noticed that your work seems to interweave a number of different strands. Psychology, relationship and family dynamics, hypnosis, shamanism, and dream work, among others. Where did you pick these threads up, and why have you blended them together instead of focusing on one or the other? Obviously, you've made a choice of how to use these in your work.
Partially it's because of my eclectic nature, that I like to collect various techniques from different cultures and see how they apply to the way our psyche works. But if you really look at all those techniques, they're all based on two things. One is accessing the subconscious mind, the other is accessing the unconscious mind. The dream work and the shamanism is all unconscious work. The hypnosis is accessing the subconscious to get in touch with old, unfinished business, past hurts, all kinds of things that happened in our past that we never freed ourselves from. Well, there are various techniques that you can use to just sort of push that little button and activate it again and allow the person to clear up what they've been blocked by without even knowing it.
How do you use hypnosis in your work? Do you use it in the workshops themselves, or was that more when you were working with people on a one-to-one?
I used it in my private counseling, and then when I went into workshops, I found a quicker hypnosis technique.
Oh, really?
Yes, and that's to point out a certain area that's of equal interest to everybody, whether it would be, for instance, guilt. As soon as you start talking about guilt and bring in certain examples or certain expressions of it, you immediately induce into the whole group an awareness of a deeper subconscious working. It works very quickly. What would take me half an hour to get a person into a state where they could actually look into their subconscious through hypnosis can be done within 5 minutes in a group process.
Is part of that because of the group dynamic itself, the different energy in a group situation rather than a one-on-one?
Yeah, it's very fascinating the way groups work. Now, groups can either be used to get people to all think the same way in some kind of brainwashing technique, or they can be used to encourage people to think for themselves. These workshops are more encouraged to have people think for themselves, but seeing that we all feel basically the same thing. We all want the same thing in our lives. We all want happiness and love and forgiveness. And to encourage each person to look at it from their own personal process. The group work works really good in that way. Now, it works really poorly when you're trying to brainwash people, because it's just a really bad scene when you're trying to get everybody to think the same way. You can only get them that way for a certain amount of time, and then the effect wears off. Whereas if you encourage people to think for themselves, they'll think for themselves for the rest of their lives.
So people who are coming to your workshops don't have to worry about mass hypnotics going on there.
I can't see how. I'm so sensitive to people taking on beliefs that aren't their own experience. Like, I really don't want anyone to believe me until they experience something for themselves. I think it would be really foolish for me to try to convince them, just give them another philosophy to live by. I'd rather encourage them to experience something and then form their own conclusions
So
from it.
basically your workshops are experiential in nature.
Yeah, totally experiential. I'd say about 80%, and then there's 20% theory to give a kind of a framework to whatever we're dealing with.
I'm also curious about the shamanism. Now, shamanism, first I'd like you to tell me what that is really. I mean, I hear that word a lot. I think people have a vague concept of what it is. Obviously, it occurred with the Native Indian groups and was of value to them. What is it, and why is it viable in our lives? How do you see it working in our lives?
Well, to put it into the approach I use, which is a more modern approach, I don't use shamanism necessarily from any culture. Shamanism basically is accessing the unconscious mind. In the unconscious mind, that's basically where the conscious mind came from, was it emerged from the unconscious. And in the conscious mind, we have very rigid ways of looking at things. For one thing, the conscious mind can only focus on one thing at a time. But because it's not trained very well, it's bouncing all over the place, so we focus on 50,000 different things a day, but only one at a time. The unconscious is capable of focusing on a number of things at once. So it gives you an entirely different perspective. The best one, the one I use it for most, is for looking at problems in a different way, or for looking at sickness in a different way. Because we have a very set idea of what cancer is, or what any kind of disease is. If you go into the unconscious mind, you find that it has a number of different forms. The people, the Indian tribes or the Hawaiian tribes that used to deal with sickness would take the person into the unconscious, and they would find that disease down there in the form of some animal that was tearing them apart. And they would have to somehow subdue the animal, overcome it, or integrate with that animal. And if they did, they would overcome the disease in their body. Now, that's only one example. What I found is that we use a lot of symbolism. Two people could have cancer, and in the unconscious it could look completely different to both of them. It could look, because in the mind you're dealing constantly with symbols, but some symbols are more important to some people than they are to others. So the shamanism for me is purely accessing the individual's unconscious mind and allowing them to see their problem the way their unconscious mind sees it. And it's easier to deal with than the way the conscious mind sees it, because the conscious mind is really rigid.
Okay. I guess my mental image of shamanism has to do with, or getting to that state. I have been part of groups where they have used drumming, for instance, rhythm, or chanting of some kind to get to that place. I'm gathering from what you say that you're not using those particular techniques, but you have others that you... I'm curious how you get to that point where you can access the unconscious like that. Is that part of the hypnosis, or is this something totally different?
It's actually, like I said, I'm an eclectic, so I use a bit of everything. Sometimes I've put on a drumming tape. I used to have a drumming tape, and that helped for a while, and then I thought, well, we've used that enough, now let's find another way. And now it's just a matter of how much the person wants to go in there. And they will go in as deep as they want to go. I could use some music, I guess, or something like that, but what's the most important aspect to the whole thing is that person. If they don't want to go, they're not going to go.
So it's not like you're going to force them to go to some level that they're not willing to access themselves.
Exactly. And occasionally the drumming, I just use my intuition, and if I feel drumming would help them in some way, then I'll put on a drumming thing, and if it works, it works. If not, I don't care. What's most important is what that person wants, where they want to go. And I just sort of travel along with them and see what they see, and my whole intention is to aim towards a healing of some kind. It doesn't have to be that the whole cancer is gone. Could be that they've learned to accept it, or to learn the lesson that the cancer is there to teach them. I'm not anyone to tell them what their cancer is there for, or what their problem is there for. But I do know how to help them find out for themselves.
That's interesting, because I think a lot of different psychological techniques have acknowledged that people's problems or difficulties or or at least a portion of them, significant portion, are rooted in past occurrences that may not have been resolved, etc. And have come up with different devices to heal that particular condition.
Right.
So I'm curious, once you get there, you know, what is your concept of how the healing occurs at that point?
It's based, I can't even say the percent, but a large percent of it is based on the person's willingness. Actually, willingness takes care of most everything that we do. If we're willing for something to happen, it will happen, because you're dealing with choice all the time. You're dealing with the person's individual choice. That choice came from their will. So if they're willing, once they're down and once they're perceiving their problem in a different way, if they're willing to be free of that problem, then something will happen. It'll either occur to me to say, well, okay, then do this, or it will occur to them. And then they'll go through the process of whatever it takes. But willingness is the key.
So that's where the intuition comes in.
Yes.
Then at that point.
Yeah.
So you don't walk in with a recipe.
I used
feel that
to.
everybody.
Yeah.
You used to.
I used to be a technique monger. I thought, I was always looking for the magic technique. When psycho-cybernetics came out, I was right in line waiting to get the book. When Primal Scream came out, NLP, all these things, when they came out, I always studied them. And I thought, maybe this will be the one. And then I realized that none of them are it. That it doesn't matter, you can have 1,000,000 techniques. And if you don't want to experience self-love, you're not going to. So there's nothing anyone can do about that.
To me, a fascinating point is when you look at your life and you recognize and acknowledge that something is not working for you, or an old belief no longer serves you really any longer. And yet there's a part of you that still believes it,
Yes.
is really stuck, knows that you want to change it, but you don't know what step to go through, what process to turn that around. Help.
Yeah. That's something that I've really, really experienced over the last, I would say, 6 months. And in the last 2 months, it became more and more evident that somebody, even though they don't want an old belief or a limiting situation in their lives, they will hang on to it, mainly because if they let go of it, something better is going to happen to them. Whenever something really good is about to happen, for instance, a relationship, you see these two people, you see them one day and they're just loving each other and they're so close and birds are flying around their heads and all that, and the next day they don't even want to be in the same country, never mind the same house. And you can't understand it. And I couldn't for a long time, but I saw this pattern happening in my relationship, in all relationships. And what I discovered is that just when things are about to get really a lot better, they will look a lot worse. And so we will buy into the problem. Because one thing we're afraid of more than pain, more than death, is that we're afraid of our happiness.
You mean we're attached to our misery? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah,
here?
it's sad, but it's true. We are terrified of our happiness. One of the Eastern philosophies says that the greatest fear is the fear of God. And so we will even sacrifice our second greatest fears, which could be, we would even die rather than be happy. And you see a lot of proof of it. A lot of people dying, not a lot of people being ecstatically happy every day, It's because we're that afraid of it. Now, in our day-to-day lives, why things happen, why problems happen, or why we get tempted to move away from our partners is for the same reason, is because we have the opportunity to take another step into a really good experience. And we're so afraid of it that we'll either hang on to the problem or buy into the temptation. You're about to get really close in your marriage. So what do? You find somebody outside the marriage and you go have an affair with them. And both people agree to this. It's not only the husband or the wife that goes out. Both people on an unconscious level, both of them agree that they'll bring somebody in and then ruin the relationship for a while or forever. Because if they didn't do that, they would get a lot closer and they would have a much higher experience in the relationship. And
So do you
God forbid.
think, so it seems to me that essentially what you're talking about is not only a fear of happiness, but a fear of intimacy.
Fear of intimacy, definitely, because with the ego can't stand intimacy. All problems are based on separation. The ego is predicated on guilt and separation. Intimacy destroys guilt and separation. So the ego will do anything it can to stop you from becoming more intimate in your life.
How do you, tell me, Christopher, how do you stop yourself from subverting yourself?
You just, it's, the word I came across a long time ago was grace. It seems purely by the grace of the universe that you can step forward. What's in our dominion is willingness. Is when the temptation comes or when the problem comes in our lives, we immediately recognize that something better is waiting for us right here. And that if we just say, okay, I'm willing to have this, then to the extent that we're willing, that's the extent to which it'll come towards us. If we're 100% willing, it will come completely towards us. If we're not willing, we'll buy into the problem or we'll buy into the temptation. Sickness is another one. We'll get sick rather than take the next step in our lives. We'll create all kinds of problems. We're so creative at problem making just to keep us from being happy, just to keep us from our success.
We're running short of time here, and I wanted to get this question in before we finish.
Okay.
Probably have to answer it pretty quickly here. But just on a personal level, I'm very curious about how someone in your position who spends a good part of the year traveling, not having a home, quote unquote, not having a center, how does your work affect your life? Are you able to apply these concepts to yourself? How do you exist in the midst of that?
Well, the reason I'm doing it is because I'm the one that needs to learn it the most. Whereas most people can get by with about 3 or 4 workshops a year, or maybe even one a year, one every 2 years, I need a good 25, 30, because I'm one of the hardheads on the planet. So I need to learn this, and so I keep putting myself into the workshops so that I can remember.
Thanks for exposing that part of yourself to us.
Thank you.
So the Love Intention with Christopher Moon, the first evening, Thursday, May 3rd at, what is this, 7:30? The second, 7 p.m., 802 Baker Street. The workshop, The Love Intention, will happen on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, May 4th, 5th, and 6th. If we've tantalized you at all, show up for the first evening lecture. And thank you again, Christopher, so much for being with us. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
So to let you know what's coming up later tonight, immediately following this show, there will be Forge in Faith, a celebration of 100 years of the Presbyterian Church in Nelson. And then live at 8 p.m. we have Newsmakers with George Miller interviewing Mike Jessen and Alderman Neville about the new recycling program in Nelson. Immediately following that, a concert from Capitol Theater with Ronnie Gilbert. If you missed this live, catch it with us because she had him really standing in the aisles. And then, last but not least, our scintillating gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Nelson City Council meeting of April 30th.
Soccer fields, and I understand we have a spokesperson.
Sort of.
Sort of. Well, feel free to introduce yourself, sort of, and tell
Most
us.
of you know me. I'm Hope Tyler from Nelson Youth Soccer, and after a process of a redesign, we from David Dobie of Residential Design Services, he met with the tramway people, and we have come up with what we feel is a pretty good location. Should I pass this around, or
Why don't we come to you?
Okay.
Easier.
On Thursday from the Trail Castlegar area, at 5 p.m. it's Faith Alive. 6 p.m. West Kootenai Today. And at 6:30, Dancing Up the Stars. Well, that's it for our show tonight. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did, and that you'll be back for Nelson Today next time. Good night.